thank you everyone for attending today. My name is Faustine Chan. I'm the Business Innovation Manager for BBB serving the Pacific Southwest. We've been holding these daily webinars just to give information and tools for our businesses, just so they can navigate through these certain times. I know a couple of states have already fully opened entirely with all the businesses, but some of the other states are slowly lifting up the rules right now. So I hope everyone's doing okay. This webinar is being recorded, so if anytime you do need to review the information or need to log off, it will be recorded and posted on events.bbbcommunity.org, and I will go ahead and put that in the chat option as well, so you have that. If you do have any questions throughout this webinar, please go ahead and just type them in the chat option. We will answer those at the end. There's also a Q&A option that you want to use too. Either or works for us, but we'll answer those at the end. I want to introduce today's speaker today. We have Jane Tierney. She is the founder and CEO of Purple Link. She founded the company in 2015 because there was a better way to achieve greater results from an organization's supply chain. Her clients discovered innovative ways to stop money leaking from the supply chain, draining the bottom line. She's also earned a degree in industrial engineering from the University of Missouri and an MBA from San Diego State. She's passionate about Lean and Six Sigma and holds a Green Belt certification from the University of Michigan, and also has CPSM and CPSD certifications from the Institute of Supply Management. She's also worked in the aerospace and high-tech industries in both engineering and supply chain departments, excuse me. So please welcome today's speaker, Jane Tierney.
Thanks, Faustine, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with everyone today. So today I'm going to talk about a vexing problem for a lot of companies, dollars that are leaking through the supply chain, draining the bottom line. It's usually accompanied by some form of risk, which is another element we're going to talk about, purging from your supply chain. So I thought I'd start by sharing this really sophisticated graph. I'm going to actually mute myself here. There we go. There we go. Okay, I thought I'd start by sharing this sophisticated graph. As a result of the coronavirus, many people really suddenly seem to be interested in supply chain. There's a lot of people that, I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. A lot of people have been interested in things like coffee and their internet for a while. But if this reflects you, does this reflect you lately? Do you see yourself in this kind of prioritization since January? If you do, you're in the right place, because I'm going to talk about supply chains, and I'm going to show you how to reduce cost and risk from your supply chain. So the relationship between cost and risk in the supply chain is fairly complicated. They are connected and then they are disconnected. And there are a lot of ways to reduce cost, but companies need to take that cost out, and they need to ensure that it doesn't creep back over the next 6 months, year, 18 months. So to show you what I mean, we're going to look at some topics today. We're going to start with the ways cost and risk can drain the bottom line, see why it's important to look beyond the price paid, which is the baseline that most companies use. We're going to take a hard look at the supply base and discuss how to identify suppliers with the greatest opportunity for cost savings and risk reduction. So we're going to show you how to do that. We're going to talk about how any organization can utilize these tools. Even one that is very small, may not have very highly trained resources and have limited resources, but you can still uncover opportunities and reduce cost and risk. And finally, I will share my model for supplier management. I'll explain why we chose the 4 components that we have, how they work together, and why all are needed to drive the progress. And then I'm going to give away some prizes. So I want us all to stay connected, and there's prizes involved. So right now, send me an email to jane@purplelink.co. It's not .com, it's .co. And put in the subject line webinar. If you do that, you're going to be in today's prize drawing, and I'll pick a winner at the end. You have to be present, so you have to stick around, but I've got some good prizes to give away. And you'll be able to receive some ongoing resources, including today's slide presentation. So send me an email right now. I know your phones are right there next to you. just put jane@purplelink.co and subject line webinar. If you're not quite ready, I'll give you another chance before we do the drawing. So I suspect you're here today because this is an important topic to you and your company. It is to most companies. Trying to reduce cost is an ever challenging goal, and it's one of those goals every year. How much cost do we want to try to take out? My clients often ask to focus on projects for reducing costs. They ask me, how can I help them find new sources, better prices? How can I help them benchmark parts and pricing and negotiate better prices? Or how can we shorten lead time so they can at least reduce their inventory a little bit? Cost reductions, or more accurately, price reductions, have been at the forefront for most companies for quite a while. It still is the primary way that companies look at is to reduce the purchase price cost. And it's projected to be at the top of the supply chain metrics for a while. This slide shows you that over the last 15 years, reducing and avoiding purchase cost has topped the list of global procurement priorities all but 2 times. 2 times in the last 15 years. This data actually goes through 2018. So it's right up there. You can see other considerations, procurements of business agility, elevating the role of procurement, and those are the top 3, and for both 2017 and 18 in a little different order. There's some other things there, but almost always it's trying to reduce and avoid purchase costs. So here's another piece of data from 2017. This is from the Hackett Group, and they show that price reduction has consumed the most resources for procurement, trying to reduce the price. They show it 5 years prior, today meaning 2017, and they show that reducing slightly. My suspicion is that it has not reduced that much. The companies are still very focused on price reduction versus demand management, total cost reduction. Assurance of supply is pretty steady. That's probably the same way. And value management, I still don't think we've reached that 18, 19, 20% in most companies. So I wasn't able to find an updated study here, but I think this is very telling that you're not seeing a lot of movement in that area. Purchasing organizations, all purchasing organizations I work with, some track in some way, shape, or form cost savings. And it's always around the price point. What have we been able to reduce the price? So we've seen a lot of companies, I've seen a lot of companies who report significant savings from cost reductions. They've got initiatives that are challenging suppliers. They come up and they self-report this, but oftentimes these cost reduction savings are challenged by other functions in the organization. Oftentimes the percent reductions that purchasing reports doesn't correlate to the numbers finance reports. And they're saying we're seeing the savings, but it's not translating to the bottom line. So what's happening? We'll talk about a couple of reasons why in a minute, but that's very frustrating for senior executives when you've got purchasing or procurement or supply chain or operations reporting very good savings, and yet it's not translating to the bottom line. My clients and most senior executives are very vocal in wanting those savings visible at the bottom line. So research shows that people are focused on reducing that price, and they may or may not be getting all of the results that they want. I'm sharing data with you, but I'm not a research person. I am a practitioner. I have a lot of experience driving cost out of supply chains, working with clients to do just that since I left the corporate world and did that in my corporate job. I have a background as an industrial engineer. Some say industrial engineers are lazy. I say we're just really focused on being efficient and productive. That's kind of a second nature for us. And typically engineers in my profession value processes, process-oriented, and they value consistency. I worked as an engineer when I first got out of school, but then I got into management and I realized that I never took any accounting and I really didn't know that much about business. So I decided I needed to get an MBA, went back to school while I was working. About the time I graduated, the company I worked for shut down the plant. So here I was with my brand new degree, my brand new diploma, lots of factory experience looking for a job. So that timing ended up being my side door, I call it, entry into supply chain management. Many of my colleagues in supply chain management didn't set out on their careers to be supply chain professionals. They kind of walked into it either from the back door or I say from the side door. I'm a little bit of a factory geek, I admit that. I like manufacturing. My husband's been dragged through lots of factory tours over the years. Sometimes he gets rewarded at the end, and that's not so bad, but I enjoy that. When I got into supply chain, I found I really enjoyed the supplier interface. I really liked working with the suppliers, finding the opportunities. I'm a big problem solver, so I like to solve the problem of how do we make this part and make this part the best we can make it. As I said, I like manufacturing, but I like non-manufacturing processes too. And I enjoyed the travel. I was lucky enough to get to visit a lot of amazing places, meet a lot of amazing people. I have relatives who think that that was a permanent vacation, although I told them very clearly it is not a vacation when you're traveling for business. But I did have the great fortune to work for some very good companies, amongst them Hewlett-Packard, very good, well-run company. When looking back over my corporate career, though, I found that I was most successful when my values were aligned with the companies I worked for. So when I started my own business, I knew I had to integrate those values into the work for myself and for my clients and to make my business successful. So I've looked at those values and make sure I incorporate those in what I do. So I started this business 5 years ago to focus on deriving more value from the supply chain. I work with clients to help them improve their bottom line, and I work with professional organizations like ISM, APIC, SIPS. I also teach college classes to give back to younger generations and to help others and to share what I've learned, and honestly, to keep my own skills sharp and honed. So what I know for sure is there's a better way. There's a better way to reduce cost, there's a better way to reduce risk, and there's a better way to demonstrably affect the bottom line in a positive manner. This requires investing time and people resources in projects that yield the greatest return. So we need to identify which projects have the opportunity and have the potential for the greatest return. I always say, why spend time trying to move boulders when there's gold nuggets and coins laying around, or just below the surface if you know where to dig? Many times in my career, I've been asked to fix a supplier. I've been asked to fix a supplier who was causing a lot of rework on the production line. Sometimes I checked in with the supplier to see what was going on, and the supplier said, we don't really know because we haven't had any lots rejected, we haven't had any returns, so we're not aware there is a problem. So communication is one of the most important things that you can do, is communicate with your suppliers. Make sure you have clear expectations. I've seen statements of work that were a little bit fuzzy. We got bids and chose suppliers based on that. And then when the statement of work or the design got a little more solid, the supplier freaked out because they weren't capable or they weren't able to maintain their cost model with the updated drawings. So it's important that you have clear expectations, that you set the standards of performance, and that you agree collectively how you're going to measure that success and the progress toward that. Again, not every organization is the same. I worked for large Fortune 500, even Fortune 50 companies, but I've dealt with a lot of small businesses as suppliers. And now I am a small business. I remember buyers back when we were faxing POs, and I remember accounts payable mailing checks to suppliers. Now, not all organizations are in the same place on what we call the maturity curve, but that doesn't mean that not all organizations can find reductions in cost and risk. So you want to make sure that the cost is taken out, that it doesn't creep back. And you want to look for different ways that, different things that cost time and money. So you want to identify and manage those risks. As I said before, there's lots of reasons that procurement's published savings don't match finances reports. One reason is because procurement always counts the discounts and the reductions in price, but they don't always count the increases to price, whether they're big or small. Sometimes those can add up. Sometimes there's a lot of other contributing factors. But if you don't count the increases as well as the decreases, you can inflate your numbers and end up inflaming the finance colleague. So you don't want to do that. So Purple Link's better way looks like this. There are 3 elements of Purple Link's process: identifying the right suppliers and the right opportunities, the ones with the highest potential for return on investment; applying a comprehensive approach to supplier management with some specific tools and strategies, and then tailoring the activities to the current state of your organization to get the best results that you can. Cost and risk both drain the bottom line. I hear a lot of questions, including, should my company focus on cost reduction, or should we focus more on reducing the risk? And how much of the savings I'm going to get from this year are really going to hit the bottom line? Those are tough, complex questions to answer. And so we want to look at this from a holistic, from a business perspective. Look at the cost of goods sold. When we look at that and how that's defined, there are lots of components of cost of goods sold, not just the purchase price of a part. There's ordering cost, holding costs, equipment costs, labor hours, labor rates, all the overheads that go with the fixed and variable costs. Reducing any of those and all of those is going to help reduce your cost of goods sold, and that will help improve the bottom line. Risks also eat into your profit because it costs money to manage those or resolve those. A small investment in risk management can help a company avoid occurrences of risk, can reduce the impact of a risk, and reduce the scope of the resolution when it occurs. Disruptions happen all the time, but surprises can cost a lot more than those risks that you know are lurking back there and that you're always kind of checking to see, is that one popping up? Cost in terms of resources are time, the time it takes to resolve an issue, the people involved in that. When you have people involved in managing risks and disruptions, that's taking time and people away from other work that you had planned and that typically you need to have done. If you have to source a supplier in an emergency situation when you all of a sudden don't have the supplier you had before and need one today, or you have to drop everything and get on a plane and go visit a supplier, or maybe drive down the street, that's not as much possible now, but that in prior to COVID days, that was very common. You had a big quality issue, you stopped what you were doing, you got on a plane, and you went and solved that problem. There's a lot of common costs that companies collect, like scrap and rework. But those may be just the tip of the iceberg when you look at the total cost that companies incur from disruptions and risk. So you have to keep in mind that revenue minus the total of all expenses equals profit. So don't limit your savings opportunity to just the prices paid. Cost and risk eat profits in different ways. Studies show that without good supplier management, companies can lose up to 75% of their savings within 18 months. I'm going to say that again. You can lose up to 75% of your savings within 18 months. That is not what you want, and that is not what you work hard to get those supplier savings to do, is to have them be eroded in 18 months. So you want to include suppliers as collaboration partners, which will help you retain even more of those savings. If you just manage supplier relationships and manage supplier performance, you can greatly increase the savings and retain those savings that you get. So if you've seen erosion in your cost savings, you're not alone. But you don't have to settle for those, and there are ways to stop that erosion and that cost creep from happening. So it's important that you choose the opportunities with the greatest potential. You want to put your limited resources, and I don't care how big your staff is, you still have limited resources to apply to this. So I'm going to do a quick little exercise here with you and ask you to pull out a piece of paper and answer these 6 questions. So we want to look at the supply base. We want to analyze this from a couple different ways. So look at these questions. First one is, and you can look at this, these questions all say 2019, but you can look at these for the last year, or you can look at these for year to date, 2020, which is now, this is the last workday for most people of the month of May, so we finished 5 months. So however you want to look at it. but be consistent. So which of your suppliers had the largest spend in 2019? Where did you spend most of your money? Which supplier had the largest volume of part numbers? So which supplier in your supply base makes more parts than anybody else? Which supplier supplies the part with the highest volume, and what part is that? So what is the part that you buy more of than any other part? What part is that? And do you know the unit cost approximately? I guess that's 3 questions, but they all go together. 4th question, which supplier received the largest number of purchase orders in the last few months or in the last year or in 2019? And then which supplier triggered the most disruptions in the last year, in 2019, in the last 5 months, however you want to frame this? And then my next question is, where's your next disruption coming from? When is it going to come? And what's going to be the cause? Why are you going to have a disruption? I want to see how much you know about your suppliers. So hopefully you've had a chance to do that. So I'm going to ask you, how many of you are surprised at your answers? And how many of you are confident in your answers, that you knew absolutely what some of these answers are? And then how many of you saw a supplier repeat 1, 2, 3, 4 times, maybe all of them? So this is a great place to look. And spend is a great place to start to analyze your suppliers and look for opportunities. Remember the old adage about follow the money? Yeah, that's a good place to start. But don't stop there. Look at not just the price paid, but look at the other areas of cost to your company. I've done it. We do quite an extensive analysis of spend when I work with clients. And I did this with one client, and found a part, they bought over 3 million pieces of this one part in the previous year. The part was small, pretty inexpensive, very cheap. 3 million parts cost only about $60,000. So the initial spend analysis, just where did the money go? This supplier didn't even pop up. They weren't near the top of the list at all, $60,000. So during the analysis, when I showed them this, the owner first thought, oh gosh, we're probably paying too much. We should probably go negotiate a price for the 3 million parts. So we looked at that, and when we checked, the price was actually pretty consistent. If you ordered over about 200,000 parts, that you got the best price. So the price didn't vary very much. And again, it was a very expensive part. Like I say, 3 million parts, $60,000. So when we looked at the variation in price, there was less than $1,000 savings there. He could have saved up to $1,000, but I think the number was in the 700s. It was not very much money. And against a $5 million spend, saving even $1,000 really is negligible. You really don't even feel that. It's a good thing to do, but it didn't spend that much. It wasn't that much of the spend. So we dug a little deeper, and we looked at that part and found that a buyer placed 63 purchase orders for those parts. 3 million parts, 63 purchase orders over the course of a year. 52 weeks in a year, that's more than 1 purchase order a week for this part. This part was very small, this electronic part, and the purchase orders range from about 250, a quantity of 250, to over 200,000 parts. So I asked the owner what it took to manage a PO. Does he have a cost to manage a PO? We see that a lot, but not a lot of companies have a very definitive number there. So they really didn't have a number for issuing, creating the purchase order, issuing the purchase order, managing it, closing it out, receiving the goods in, and all that. But they had done a recent analysis on what it cost to process an invoice. So they knew what that cost to process the invoice. And that cost was $300 an order. So $300 an order times 63 purchase orders, that was almost $19,000 of my client's money to pay the vendor for $60,000 worth of parts. And that didn't account for all the cost of the people in the warehouse who were receiving the parts, transacting that, actually storing the parts. So I worked with the client. We decided to order monthly quantities of 250,000 parts and adjust those orders if the stock exceeded a certain level, or if they got short, they ordered a little bit sooner. So that yielded a savings of $18,000 just on processing the invoices. If you add in the $1,000 of the higher prices paid and some of the others, it was over $20,000 savings on an analysis that didn't take very long to do, but did ask a lot of questions in a lot of different ways. So it was a good return on the money spent there. So looking at which suppliers, you're trying to separate the critical few from the trivial many. And I'm a big Harry Potter fan, so I love the sorting hat, because that's what you're trying to do to your supply base. You're trying to sort through the supply base, and many companies have hundreds or thousands of suppliers. So you can't spend time with all of those. You're trying to find what is my best opportunity. So looking at historical spend, again, is a good start, but you want to make sure that it reflects the current spend and it also reflects your expected spend. What about areas that you're going to grow and spend more with a supplier than you spent in the last 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, year? So you want to make sure you do that. Then you also want to look at suppliers that are critical to your production. You want to look at the parts that are made. So which suppliers make the parts that are the most important for your goods and services that you produce. You also want to look at intellectual property. You want to look at which suppliers handle your intellectual property as a customer, and you want to look at where you have a supplier's intellectual property embedded in your part. Single and sole sources are an important thing to look at. Single sources meaning they have all your volume. You can find other sources are available, but all of your volume is with one supplier. Sole sources are, it's very difficult to move that part. You couldn't find very many sources, if any other sources, that could make that part. But you also want to look at qualification requirements. So which suppliers required that you actually qualify parts, or that you certify that supplier to make those parts. Or if you move those parts, that you would have to re-qualify the parts, the processes, the tools. So that's another area to look at. You want to look at the state of your relationship. Is that a good relationship with the supplier? Is it a long-term one? If it's long-term, is it good? Is it vibrant? Or maybe it's a little stale? Is this a purely transactional thing that you're buying stuff like you're buying from Amazon, where you go in and you pay the price that's advertised? There's no negotiation, there's no deals, there's no working on that. And are you looking at suppliers who are new to your organization, or maybe they're hungry, maybe they'd like more volume. Also look at where you've invested in tools, where you have consigned tools or consigned material. I can add lots more to this. Foreign sources, long lead parts, places where you add more inventory to your books because you're taking possession of the product when it leaves the dock in China. So which ones are there other than just spend? And then which of the suppliers that are on the high spend list are really ones you can't do much with? They're more transactional, less strategic. So you want to categorize these suppliers by a lot of different criteria to find these opportunities and then prioritize the opportunities. So again, organizational maturity is a term that applies to a lot of aspects of a company, but I've constructed a model here built for purchasing and supply chain departments. These are a few of the characteristics that define the level of maturity. So you can look at those: the structure and process of the organization, the spend analysis, the supplier relationships and formality of supplier relationship management, supplier risk management. Another area I like to look at is the stature of procurement in the organization, or purchasing, or the supply chain organization, which means what do the other departments and functions think of that function? Is it just a service organization, or is it a trusted partner in what you're doing as a team, as a company? So you have organizations with 1 or 2 buyers, and then I've worked with organizations that have commodity managers, category managers, supplier quality people, project managers, the new product development people, all kinds of different things. It may take a village to actually achieve some of these savings, but in my experience, it's not hard to motivate people from other functions to participate, because cost reductions is one of those goals that everybody wants to participate in. Everyone recognizes the need, and most people are willing to offer resources to help support that. So the org maturity is really a continuum. So you have to consider not only the characteristics that we talked about, but the size of the organization, meaning more than just the number of people in it, but the depth of the organization, the performance of the suppliers that they manage, and their ability to track and measure that performance. It takes into account whether you're using spreadsheets or ERP systems, the structure of the purchasing department, and again, how are those people and how is that function viewed both individually and collectively by the rest of the organization? Is it seen as a service organization or a trusted partner? And part of that is how is purchasing structured? Do they report to finance with maybe just a lead person or a first line manager? Or are these functions all lumped in under operations? Or is there an organization that's solely purchasing, maybe led by a vice president or a chief procurement officer, CPO, that reports to the CEO and manages strategies, initiatives, improvement projects? All different forms of these organizations exist. All can work and all can be improved with and deliver better results to the bottom line. So where is your organization? So here's the model that I've created. So this may sound pretty easy, good, but we don't have people to do this. We don't have extra things to take on, but you really have to start first with looking at analyzing your organization and being honest about where you fall on this continuum. If you're an organization that focuses primarily on converting recs to purchase orders, getting parts in on time, not running out, and yet not overstocking, then you're more of an assurance of supply organization. If you have a broad organization, a lot of levels deep, you have processes, you have procedures, you have supplier management, supplier risk programs, then you're probably closer to the value management. So supply chains range from small centralized teams to broad staff decentralized functions. There's a lot of in between there. What you're looking for is, do we have our targeted active supplier management that's driven by purchasing, or do other functions feel like they own these relationships? I've worked for and seen both, where purchasing or supply chain or procurement actually very much owns those relationships. They're very cross-functional. They include lots of other people, but the relationships are owned and managed by procurement. I've seen other organizations where other functions take the lead depending on the supplier. Sometimes it's a quality one, sometimes it's a contracts one, sometimes it's an engineering function that feels like they own that relationship. So that helps you determine where you are on the scale. So keep in mind that improvement projects should and do, successful ones, involve cross-functional teams. So you want to utilize talents that reside within the organization. So look for your colleagues and support functions, stakeholders to get resources. And adding key individuals from targeted suppliers is also a great way to add to the talent. If you collaborate with suppliers to reduce cost, it's going to save you time, money, and you're going to get a better result because they have stake in that too. They have some skin in the game. So understand your organization's maturity level, look at this scale, and help identify the target the skills that you need and the gaps that you have. When you identify this, it helps you when you're hiring people. You look for skills to augment and to add to the talent that you have. Or if you're able to add new individuals to your team, you're looking for a specific set of skills. That helps that hiring process and helps you augment and continually build your team. So you want to manage cost and risk, but it takes effort, time, and it's going to take some teamwork to get that done. So we've talked about the cost and risk components. We've talked about the maturity level. We talked about why you have to know your supply base. So now we're going to tie this back to supplier management. There's 4 areas in business that companies usually focus on: profit, insight, effectiveness, and proficiencies. Profit is really about how you're going to sustain your business, how you can do things better. Today, companies spend 70%, up to 70% on material, direct material. So when they're spending that much of their direct cost on material, then this becomes a very, very important thing. And that kind of percentage really, really ties closely to profit. So profit is a big deal for companies. You want to make sure that they stay in business. Insights are the things that make sure you know your business core competencies, and you're able to drive creativity and innovation throughout your business to stay successful and to sustain your business. In supply chains, that means you have to access the insights, creative ideas, and innovation from your supply base. Knowing the supplier's strengths, weaknesses, core competencies, capacities, capabilities, and harnessing all that expertise to improve your own product designs, the quality, the availability of parts, will also help you reduce cost and risk. And that's part of supply chain's charter, is to do that. Effectiveness is really getting the job done, but it needs to be done consistently. So a company can depend and rely on suppliers executing agreements and contracts over time and getting good and consistent results. Then you have effective supply chains that are providing what you need, when you need it, at the quality and at the price you need. And finally, proficiency is ensuring that you have the right skills, talent, and resources to manage all of this, that you're hiring, developing, and retaining the company's skills, that skill base to support achieving goals year over year. So our model has connected these 4 areas to supply chain, supply management techniques. So profit aligns with supplier performance. These two go hand in hand. If suppliers have deficiencies in delivery, quality, responsiveness, compliance, or they're not aligned with your social responsibility goals and initiatives like sustainability, then you're going to erode your profit. As I said, you've got to get these insights from your suppliers to integrate those back into your own operations organization. That requires mutual trust, regular communication, one-on-one relationships with counterparts between supplier and customer, escalation paths that you can raise flags when issues arise, and commitments to collaborate, respond, and support the other organization. These insights can stay locked away if you don't have the right techniques to bring that out. So you want to make sure that you have the relationships that are tapping into that, into those resources. Effectiveness, again, getting things done, it needs to be consistent, not with surprises or unwanted or unexpected results. So that's aligned with supplier risk management. Managing the risks with and within suppliers is a component of supplier management that you need for consistent success. And then being able to juggle all of these components, along with keeping the purchase orders issued on time, your inventory balances right, your logistics choices in line with your goals. All of this means you have to have the right talent in your organization. You have to have the right business acumen. You have to know which suppliers to apply all of these aspects to, because you don't manage performance, relationships, and risk with 100% of your supply base. So you have to discern which suppliers are the ones that you're going to apply these resources to. So you want to look at that. Getting and acquiring, hiring, and retaining the right talent has been an ongoing challenge of mine through my managerial career. And I know a lot of other organizations struggle with that as well. So it's important to have the right skills and to keep those. One last piece of research I'm going to share with you is on supplier performance management and supplier collaboration. So this shows that 60% of procurement's focused time is spent with suppliers before the contract is signed. Once the contract is signed, then procurement's time with that supplier and effort falls off, 40% after the contract, and yet that's where the work is done. So this particular research project said that if you have basic management, then you oftentimes have that cost creep, you lose the efficiency, you lose the effectivity. Value escapes. If you add supplier performance management, moderately improves everything. And you can add this in a lot of different ways. But if you're managing and monitoring supplier performance, feeding that back to your suppliers so that they are improving, then you're going to get better results. And if you add in supplier collaboration, then you're going to create new value above and beyond the contract. You're going to be able to sustain the value that you expected to get from that contract, and you're going to be able to exceed that. So the three factors for success are knowing the right suppliers and picking the right opportunities to go after. Applying comprehensive supplier management tools, techniques, take an approach to that, and then tailoring it to the maturity of your organization in order for you to get great results. So now you know the basics of this, but I know this isn't easy to understand, implement, communicate, and bring into an organization. At this point, when I do this presentation, I usually ask for your thoughts on what I've just shared, but it's a lot harder versus via Zoom. So I'm going to ask you to put into the chat, or maybe just write down, if you don't want to share with everyone else, you can do it privately to me through the chat, or you can just share it. Is there one thing that you can take away from this presentation? Is there something I've talked about today that was an aha for you? Or have you found at least one tool, technique, idea that you can take back to your company? I'd like to, like I say, I like to do this in person when I can ask this question and get a discussion. Can't really do that here. So take just a minute and see if there's anything here that I've shared with you that has struck a nerve or made you think about something you can do. And while you're doing that, if you're like me, I attend these talks frequently. You know, I find webinars that are interesting, and I get inspired a lot of times. I go to conferences and I get inspired. But once you get back to the office, or now if you get back to your office mode because we're working from home, if it's not your actual office, that you can still forget. You get distracted by disruptions. You try to implement ideas that others don't fully grasp. Maybe you got part of the process, but you don't get all of it. And if you try to implement that, that can be really frustrating. So I know this is a tough thing to do, but it is, it's possible, it's practical, it is time worn, and it's proven by clients and my history. So not all of you need or want more information on this topic. Some organizations and some companies have great in-house resources, and they're addressing a lot of this. They're working on the cost all the time, and they have lots of good initiatives. But if your organization isn't equipped for those activities that I've talked about today, and if you'd like to implement either some or all of these techniques and processes in your workplace, I invite you to consider working with me. If you're impatient to get started, let's talk soon. You can schedule a call with me to explore working together further. This call is complimentary, but I have reserved a limited number of slots, and I'm making these available to people who need more assistance implementing one or more of these concepts, and to get the results you probably need this year. On this call, I'll walk you through a process that identifies your biggest savings opportunities and help you see how you can do that. Then we'll decide together how to work together further to help you maximize your opportunities. I take this time to work with you personally because working together requires mutual investment, mutual trust, and I want us both to be confident that Purple Link is the right fit for you and your organization. It's simple to get this free call. Just go to callwithjane.com. Again, I know your phone's sitting right there, so pick up your phone. You can actually put callwithjane.com. It will take you to my calendar. You can pick your time zone, pick your day and time, and then you're all set. It's a great option if you're not sure of the steps to do, if you have more questions about this, and if you really are committed to stopping the dollars leaking from your supply chain. I know some of you are thinking, that sounds good, I'll do it later. I'm going to give you an incentive to do it now, before the weekend overtakes you, before you forget, get engrossed in many other activities on your to-do list, and before you lose my contact information. So this is what we're going to do. If you book a call with me in the next 30 minutes, you'll get two great gifts. You're going to get the slides from this presentation, and you're going to get a 1-month subscription to my dynamic dialogue webinars. These are valued at $145, and you'll get the subscription starting in July. These webinars are weekly, they're interesting, they're informative, they're good for any type of supply chain professional or someone who's interested in that. and they offer tips and ideas that you can integrate into your supplier management and into your supply chain management. So take a minute right now. If you want to do that, call with Jane and book a call with me. So now it's time for prizes. If you didn't already send me your email with webinar as the subject, then I need to get that from you now. I'm hoping that we have a lot of people who have put their names in and are interested in this. If you get this prize, you're going to receive more info about the webinars, the workshops from the email you send. And if you'd like a follow-up call from me, if you don't want to go to call with Jane, but you do want to talk, then just put follow up in the subject along with the webinar. So I'm going to give you a minute to send those emails, and then I'll award the winner 3 great prizes. So as I'm going to give you some time, I'm going to go through today's prizes. The slides from today's presentation. Anybody and everyone who participates in the drawing is going to get the slides from today's presentation. So the winner will also get that as well. Then you're going to get a great read, Measure What Matters by John Doerr. This is a book that Bill Gates has recommended, I think, as part of the summer reading, and it includes John Doerr's experience working as a venture capitalist with Google. And he talks a lot about Google in this book. He also talks about objectives and key results. So these are, he calls them OKRs. He says when he first started working with the founders of Google, they had some great ideas, but they really didn't have a plan. They didn't have any kind of way to measure their progress. So objectives and key results, OKRs, and you can learn about that from him. And also you'll get a 1-month subscription to the Dynamic Dialogue weekly webinars. Again, this subscription starts in July. And did I mention that it's $145? If I didn't, it is. So it's a great prize, free stuff. So we have more information on our events, workshops, and trainings on our website, which is purplelink.co. So I'm going to give 30 more seconds to people to send me an email with webinar, and then I'm going to pick a winner. Okay, I have several people who have signed up, and I am doing this from a random process, looking at the numbers in there and doing kind of a random number generator, and the winner is Justine Tang. So Justine, congratulations. I'm going to have you email me your address so I can send you the book, and then I'll sign you up for the Dynamic Dialogue webinars. And thank you all, everyone who participated. I will give you the slides as from this presentation. So thanks for everyone. So finally, I want to leave you with a thought. I do dynamic dialogues, and I always do strive to thrive. That's kind of my thing for the year. So this one I thought was very poignant and on time for today. Whenever you see a successful business, someone once made a courageous decision. So those of us in business know we make decisions all the time. Some of them we feel are pretty courageous, some of them are pretty routine. But success requires a few courageous decisions. So I know I've worked for companies where the pressure for savings is intense. I know how it feels to have that pressure on you all the time. A few years ago, I developed this supplier management model, and I shared that at the Institute for Supply Management's annual conference. I got great feedback afterwards. I had a lot of fun doing it. I put it together with a couple colleagues of mine. We did it just on our own because it was something we all needed in our workplace. We presented it, and we got terrific feedback. After doing that, I knew I wanted to focus on working with suppliers. I wanted to focus on supplier management. My corporate boss at the time thought that my time was better spent approving purchase orders and doing some requotes for parts, and again, trying to drive down the purchase price. That should be my focus. And my boss wasn't really that worried, wasn't as worried as I was when I found out that a long-term supplier had shed all of his other clients, or almost all, and now the company I worked for was 90% of the supplier's business. So that struck terror in my soul, made me lose sleep a little bit. So cost and risk are inherent, but there's ways to reduce cost and manage the risk. You have to manage both the probability of the risk and the impact of the risk. So I've shown you a few ways to do that. I hope you took away at least one way to do that. And I encourage you today to make a decision that's courageous and make that improvement for your company. So that's what I have. And now I will take questions.
Yes, thank you, Jane. If you do have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat option or the Q&A. We can go ahead and answer those. We have a question on, let's see, when should you look at your suppliers list to reevaluate which ones are the best for you or which ones are working with you? Is that something you should do annually, biannually? What's your opinion?
So I say you should do it at least annually. With the pandemic and the COVID and all of the changes, I think it's a good idea to do it again now. Even if you did it in the January timeframe, I would say go back in June, maybe July, and look at your suppliers again. Things change. A lot of companies are making parts that they weren't making 6 months ago, and a lot of companies aren't making parts that they were making 6 months ago. So things have changed a lot. Outside an extraordinary thing like the pandemic, I would say at least annually. And if your business is changing really fast, then you probably want to do it every 6 months.
In your opinion, do you feel like the prices are dropping right now when it comes to that kind of materials that people are looking for when it comes to supplies?
I'm seeing prices drop and some prices increase. Through the pandemic, we've seen people who distributors, manufacturers, whoever is selling, we've seen them some price gouging going on. I think that's abating. We've seen the price of oil go down. So the price of oil going down drives a lot of other things that are made from petroleum products. So you're seeing kind of both. The economy right now is, who knows? I think they're going to be all over the place for the rest of the year, probably for the next year, maybe even 18 months.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we have a question. My company usually awards bids and projects to companies with the lowest bids instead of other factors. Do you have any advice for me to approach this to management to look at some of the ways that you talked about?
Yeah, you need a total cost assessment. And you can do a matrix, a simple matrix with some different factors in it. So there's price is a big one, but there's a lot of other factors too. So you have to look at your business. If you contact me, I can share some things with you. It's pretty easy. If you do a call with me, we can talk about that. There's a lot of ways to put together things, and you can weight the different criteria. But price, total cost is total cost, and that includes quality, freight, handling cost, the cost of managing the supplier. It includes the cost of acquisition, any extraordinary things you have to do, anything else that might relate to your business, the location of the supplier, any number of things. So you can put together a matrix and do a pretty quick supplier selection process that includes a lot more than that. And when you get a process like that that has more people involved, you want other stakeholders, like from quality, maybe engineering, maybe finance, marketing, whoever you're working with, internal to your company, then you get more people supporting that supplier selection and working to make that successful.
Great, thank you. Let's see. What is the biggest mistakes and repeated mistakes that companies continue to make when it comes to supply chain?
Oh, wow, that's a huge question. I think that they focus on details and not enough on the strategic implications. As I've said, companies are spending more and more money with suppliers to acquire parts because they're more and more horizontally integrated, and they too often look at purchase price and not all the other costs of what they're doing and where they're spending their money, because the cost of goods sold is a big bucket.
Great, thank you. I think that's all the questions that I see. I don't see anything else. I'll just give everyone a minute or two if you have any additional questions for Jane. But thank you, Jane, for taking time out of your busy day to present today's webinar. Information is definitely valuable. I know a lot of companies are just scrambling right now, just looking at suppliers and just reevaluating their businesses right now, just looking at their budgets too. So that's the main thing that a lot of businesses are
Right.
looking at. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for attending today. This webinar is recorded, so it will be posted on events.bbbcommunity.org. I don't see any other questions, so thank you everyone. Please have a great weekend and please stay safe out there.
And thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity, Faustine. Have a great weekend.